I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Kim Iversen. She's the host of The Kim Iversen Show and a former contributor for The Hills Rising. Kim, welcome back. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So I have to tell you, first and foremost, congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you. Yeah, I got married, although we had like a little bit of a snafu because we just found out yesterday that our marriage license was rejected.
No.
Yeah, it was rejected by the court because there was a typo. And so they sent it back to us and they said, this is, we're not going to accept this and you guys have to redo it. Not the wedding, luckily, but we have to fill out the marriage license and submit it and pay them money. And yeah, so
there's so many things you have to do to go along with that you don't realize until you get married.
Well, and it was just crazy because it was just a small typo. It was in the word, Los Angeles. My sister, when she filled it out as the witness, she kind of misspelt the Angeles part of Los Angeles. And it's like, obviously they know what it means. I mean, she's not talking about some other place, but,
Exactly.
and, the address of where we were married and everything was on there. And, but they, for whatever reason, they're extremely anal retentive about it. So they said, nope, that's a little typo there. It's like missing an E. So we can't go forward with this. And so we're having to redo the license, but hopefully not the wedding or the marriage itself.
No, oh my God. Now, I have a question. Did you enjoy wedding planning? Because I actually liked it and my friends did not like wedding planning at all.
Yeah, I didn't like it much. I liked a bit. I mean, there were aspects of it that were fun, but for the most part, no, I didn't. I mean, I enjoyed the wedding. It turned out beautiful. I was really happy with how it turned out. We, of course, had snafus on the wedding day. Who doesn't? But all in all, it turned out to be a really wonderful wedding. But the planning process was really stressful getting to it. And, you're just kind of trying to appease a lot of different people. It's not just what the bride wants or what the groom wants. And even if it were just what the two of us want, we have to still negotiate with each other on what we want. And that was even a battle, me saying to him, well, I want pink bridesmaids dresses. And in his mind, he hears pink and he's like, pink. Like he's thinking cotton candy pink, bubblegum pink, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking this like extremely like light nude blush type pink, right? In my mind, but I called it pink and he freaked out. And so I thought, I got to change the color of my dresses because he doesn't want pink at all. He said, no pink. So I'm trying to accommodate him. And a month went by and I was going through all these different colors of dresses for the bridesmaids. And I could never, and I just finally went back to him and I said, I just really think that the only thing that makes all of this go together with everything I've already ordered is this pink. And then he sees the swatch of the pink and he goes, oh, that's nice. I like that. I'm like,
I know.
A month of this. I should have just shown you the swatch to begin with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you thinking about changing your last name or are you going to keep it the same?
Publicly, my last name is the same. But
Okay.
no, I actually have always had a different last name privately.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So that way I'm not findable, but yeah, I'm taking his last name.
Awesome.
But nobody else will know. It'll be the same. Kim Iversen.
Gotcha. No, been. I don't blame you, actually. I don't blame you. So the first question I have for you, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but Gavin Newsom, I know you're in California, He actually met with Jill Biden recently when Joe Biden was in Saudi Arabia. And I was like, what is this meeting all about? Why is he meeting with her when Joe's out of town? And then I saw later after that both Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris were looking at donors together. So I'm predicting that they're trying to look at Gavin Newsom as possibly someone that will primary Joe Biden because the majority of people don't want Joe Biden to run in 2024. And I'm curious to hear, what do you think about that? Like, how do you feel about Gavin Newsom? And do you think that's something that could actually work?
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you're saying that Gavin Newsom was finding donors together with Kamala Harris?
Him and Kamala Harris together were looking at donors.
So that wouldn't be primarying Joe, right? That would be the Democratic Party finding a replacement for Joe, so that right. So Joe would have to step aside willingly in that situation and hand the baton to Gavin Newsom. So that's what that sounds like to me. First of all, that's not primary. I wouldn't imagine Kamala wouldn't go along with that. The Democratic Party wouldn't go along with it. I don't think they would primary him, but I've had no doubt that they would make him step aside. And it's interesting because I think their plan originally always was to have Kamala Harris take over. That's why they chose her as vice president. I always have predicted from the very beginning that the whole plan was to get Joe to move aside and Kamala Harris would be president. But unfortunately for the Democratic Party, no one likes Kamala. So they can't do that, right? I mean, they got a problem on their hands. They can't actually slide her into the Oval Office when she's just not accepted by the Democratic base. So they would need to find someone else. The only other person that I could think of that they would want to try to get would be Pete Buttigieg. But again, you've got a problem with Pete because he hasn't really governed anything. You know, he hasn't held a Senate seat or anything that usually is a precursor before you become president of the United States. So
that's right.
But they would want anybody who's also part of that establishment machine, who's going to go along with the same foreign policy advisors that they've got from West Exec advisors. That would be the Tony Blinkens of the world and the Michelle Flournoys and the, you know, all the people that make the foreign policy happen that we've got right now, the disastrous foreign policy. They would want somebody that goes in line with that. And that's actually Hillary Clinton's foreign policy team. So, and also that was under Obama as well. So it's the whole Democratic establishment machine. So it makes sense to me that they would say, yeah, Gavin Newsom, because he's definitely part of the establishment, definitely part of the Democratic establishment political machine. So it makes sense that they would try to insert him in. And it also makes sense that they would try to get the governor of California, assuming that, you know, well, he'll get all the votes, you know, he'll get a lot of popular votes from California. And maybe Gavin Newsom is the only other one that could take on Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, is maybe what they're thinking, because they are probably assuming in the calculus, they're thinking that they've got to have like a straight white male is probably why they're thinking, you know, to take on DeSantis and to take on Trump to get those voters back from the Republican Party, those moderate voters, I suppose. But it's a stupid calculation. The reality is people aren't voting based on that. They're voting based on actual policies and what the parties are actually standing for. That's why they're rejecting Democrats. They're not rejecting Democrats because they're presenting them with, you know, a Black Asian woman or a gay man. That's not why voters are saying, we're done with you. And so it's just a miscalculation on their part to be like, well, Gavin Newsom's the answer. Gavin Newsom was, he was recalled here in California. And they say, oh, no, his recall went really well. Everybody voted for him back in office. So that's just not, the fact that it even got to the point of recall shows that the voters in California are not thrilled with Gavin Newsom. And the only reason why he really won that recall was because the Republican Party put up, just not a serious candidate for that a lot of people would accept. No offense to him. I'm sure he was a serious candidate. He meant it. He was being serious, but I'm just saying a lot of people didn't take him seriously, right? They weren't going to go for it. So, I don't, they're dead in the water. I don't think Democrats are going to win unless barring something really crazy happening between now and 2024. I just don't see them winning. And I could understand where they think maybe their odds are higher with Gavin Newsom, but I don't. because he's familiar for people. He's familiar with the typical Democratic voter, I suppose. He's more of the same, but is that really what they want? More of the same? I don't know. What do you
Exactly.
think about it? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
I think it's awful. I think it doesn't matter who they put up at this point because it's just been such a failure. A lot of people are leaving the Democratic Party. I've seen the numbers. I'm done. Like, I'm personally done with the two-party system. I'm just like, after Bernie Sanders, let down twice. And then I said, well, we still have hope in the squad. And then the squad gets in there and they just go along with corporate Democrats. They're out there voting to give billions of dollars to Ukraine. They're out there voting for NATO. And so I'm just like, no, they're one of them now. We can't even count on them to try to help and do anything. And so I think the two-party system is just a huge problem. And I don't see anything getting done with people running into those two parties because they're just both corporate.
Yeah, I don't think there's any hope right now for the Democratic Party to kind of come back from a lot of the things that have been happening. I think America's pretty fed up with them in particular. And I think there's kind of a resurgence going on in the Republican Party that's interesting to watch, but I do see them kind of going down the wrong path. And I think DeSantis, he should be really careful. I think him really latching on to this whole like trans issue and groomer issue. I understand parents are really worried. If you all, there's always kind of this, if you play on a parent's fears, then you could actually get pretty far with that in a lot of ways. I mean, they played on parents' fears during the pandemic. They play on parents' fears when it comes to the groomer schools. They play on parents' fears when that's how Youngkin got elected in Virginia. When you play on parents' fears and you say this, when parents get pissed, things happen, right? So I understand Ron DeSantis kind of playing that card and being like, well, hey, parents, your kids aren't safe when they go to school because they're being indoctrinated with all of this like liberal craziness. I just wish he would stay away from that, though, because I don't think it's as pervasive of a problem as they make it sound. I think that a parent has every right to be very concerned about what their kid is being taught in schools. I just don't know if it needs to become a political platform. I think that's something that parents take up with the PTAs and with their school boards. And then, so Ron DeSantis kind of adopting that is, to me, very similar to Democrats adopting a lot of the, what I would, say woke type sort of rhetoric of we've got to fight for the rights of everybody, and they start listing all these categories of people, and they kind of participate in this. Well, you're not as oppressed as this group, which is not as oppressed as this group. And we're trying to help all these oppressed people. And in reality, they help no one when they do that, right? They don't then implement any policies that actually help anyone. They just say, it just makes you feel good. Okay, we recognize that you've had a hard life. I mean, so I see Republicans now kind of doing that same thing. And I think, oh gosh, now all hope really is lost. I was hoping that they would at least kind of pick up the populist baton and try to run with it, because there's a lot of the same ideas, even though they might have a slightly different solution. There's a lot of that same sentiment and a lot of the same desires coming from the populist right as the populist left. But I feel like they're kind of losing it a little bit.
I agree. Now I know like you were a part of the Bernie Sanders movement, and your shows was one of the ones that I watched, and you were giving a lot of information about Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement. How do you feel about the progressive movement today? When you look back on 2018 to 2020, how do you feel about it today?
I don't think there is one anymore. I think, or if there is, I don't recognize it. It's something different. It's morphed, right? So I do feel like whatever the movement was that I was a part of, that I thought that I was going for, it's gone, it's changed, it's shifted, or it just, my dad puts it a really good way, and he's a real big progressive. And he was saying to me the other day, it is really like a movement that got it, it's a movement that got its head cut off. And with Bernie Sanders, the Democratic establishment just cut off his head. And then there's no leader. So it's just kind of like flailing around and trying to figure out which direction it's going in. And when you're in that situation, the movement just kind of eventually turns into its own different animal, its own monster. It's going in this other multiple different directions. It doesn't have any leadership. It doesn't know what it's doing. And that's what happens when you cut off the head of a movement. And the Democratic Party figured out how to successfully do it. And they probably calculated that out. They probably figured, if we could just bury Bernie Sanders, then the rest won't know where to go or what to do. And they'll go in all of these weird directions. And they probably did plant. I mean, I don't put it past them. Of course, they have operatives. They're paid millions of dollars to do this. They probably did plant plenty of ideas into the heads of people that they found were rising leaders in the Democratic Party. And they were like, just focus on racism, just focus on bigotry, just focus on sexism. And then that way they won't focus on the real things that are actually affecting Americans, like big money interests and foreign policy disasters, right? Just focus on, just make sure people believe that this is the existential crisis of the day and not what's actually the existential crisis.
Right. I mean, I know that, I don't know, like when I look at the progressive movement, I think one of the things that's been really disappointing, especially for those of us that like supported, donated money to those politicians or canvassed for them, is that it seemed like to me the moment that they got in, they didn't want to talk to independent media anymore. Like,
Right.
forget it. Like trying to get AOC to come talk to independent media, forget it. Like I feel like they completely just sold out and just forgot like who gave them that base to begin with. And I always remind people, although I know some people don't like Jimmy Dore, but Jimmy Dore was the first person that gave AOC a platform, and she won't go on there either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they just got swallowed up. I mean, once they got in there, they got swallowed up by the establishment. They were, I don't, part of me really would like to at some point, like run for office just to maybe win and then go and find out like, what the heck happens? Like, how do you guys get so corrupted so quickly? And it's like, that would be my only job. I'm like, I'm not really here to, I mean, I'll make some, I'll do some good votes and stuff, but I know I'm only here for a short time because you people are going to get rid of me real quick. But I'd like to know how that happens so I can at least go talk about it. How do you guys go about doing that? But yeah, they just get sucked up really quick by the machine. I think a lot of it is just being told you're not going to have any power. Your vote's going to be meaningless. Look what we did to Tulsi Gabbard. They probably like dangle people in front of them and are like, do you want to be like this? How about like this person? Do you want to be, you can either continue to be in the spotlight and make some change, or we oust you, you become nobody and you make no change. And probably a person like AOC makes a calculation and thinks, I'd rather make some change than no change, not to give her any excuses. But I think maybe that's the calculation they make. And so they go along with the machine, and then they figure the thing that they can make change on is just, but then it's like, well, what change do they make? Where is that change? We would like to see, what do they think is actually the beneficial reason why they're selling out in every other way? I'd like to know what she's hanging her hat on to say, well, it's worth it because I'm doing this XYZ thing. I don't know what that is.
That's right. That's right. Well, I interviewed Ro Khanna recently, and I asked him a lot of questions. And one of the ones that I asked him was about Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And I said, why are they not being held accountable? Why do they still have committee assignments? And they're voting against things that we need to get passed. Now, I would say some of these bills are crumbs. They're not really, I guess, like, they're not really bills that have a lot of meat in them that would actually really change people's lives. But they're always the reason. If it's not them, I told Ro Khanna, it's the Senate parliamentarian who seemed to come out of nowhere, that I'd never heard of this person before. It's always an excuse.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, even if it's not Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, when it came to $15 minimum wage, we saw there were 8 Democrats who voted against it. And of course, he gave me a very politician answer and didn't really kind of answer the question. And I'm just like, no, but why are they not being held accountable? So his excuse was that, well, Joe Manchin's from a red state. Kyrsten Sinema, I think, is going to have a primary challenge. But it seems like to me the president is Joe Manchin and the vice president is actually Kyrsten Sinema. That's what it seems like to me. But it just, even with him, talking to him, I could tell it just seemed like he was holding back some.
Yeah.
You could feel like the frustration.
Right. I mean, I actually would agree more with like Joe Manchin's reasons for voting the way he does than the whole excuse that Ro Khanna gave for Kyrsten Sinema. And the reason is, your job as a senator or as a congressperson is to be a representative of the people that are your constituents. So you should vote not the way you want, but the way your constituents want. So I think that's fair, and I think that's their job. in fact. So I actually think a politician should absolutely set aside their own personal, what they think should or should not happen. And they should vote the way their constituents want. However, I also think their job is to use their bully pulpit, and to go and to say to their constituents, this is why these things are good. They should advocate for why they think they should be voting a certain way, and then, try to convince their base. And if their base goes along with it, great. And if their base doesn't, then I do believe they should still represent their base. Kyrsten Sinema, though, for it to be like, well, they're going to get primaried and they're going to lose their job. So what? So what? You're going to lose your job? Like, oh, that's what you're afraid of? But I get, so that is not to me an excuse. Now, if she says, well, this is the way my constituents want me to vote, that's one thing, right? If she says, well, this is how they want me to vote, so I'm going to vote the way that they want. But I just don't think, when it comes to Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin, I don't think either of them are actually sampling their bases to find out what they really think about any of these things. So that's where so then I'm like calling BS on the whole thing,
That's right.
But certainly you shouldn't be worried about, like, well, I might get primaried. Well, okay, then let the voters speak. That's what democracy is, that you guys keep screaming about, saying is constantly under threat. Well, it's under threat when you don't even allow the process to happen. Also, that's also making it under threat. So the whole, well, I might get primaried, so I have to play it safe is, that doesn't make sense to me. Let the voters speak. And if they speak and they oust you, then I guess now you know. But
Exactly. I'm curious to hear, what do you think about, so Andrew Yang has announced that he has a new party, the Forward Party.
Right.
I've seen him on a couple of interviews. I did see him very quickly, actually, before we went live. Someone told me on call-in that I needed to watch the segment that he did today on Rising. And I have to say, I'm a little concerned in reference to Forward Party, because Jesse Ventura was on here recently and he said he's on board with Forward Party. But I told him, I said, I didn't see anything about Medicare for all. So that's like a big one for me. But then I heard Andrew Yang earlier today, he was on Rising. And now he's saying, like, yes, he still believes in UBI, but he's not going to push for it because he doesn't think that it has a chance. So the question I think that I've had is, what exactly are the policies with Forward Party? I'm 100% for third parties. I'm just not sure about this one per se.
Right. Okay. I haven't seen the interview today. I did watch Bree's Radar from yesterday, where she kind of did a breakdown, her critiques, and her critique was similar to yours. She was saying that, the policy, there's no policies with the Forward Party that people are really wanting, like Medicare for all. And so without those policies, you don't really have a third party. And in that segment, Robbie actually, if you listen all the way to the end, when Robbie begins, he actually makes the case for what the Forward Party actually is, even though Robbie didn't know he was doing that. But he just said, what's the point of a third party if you can't even get ballot access? What's the point of even making these policies? You can create the most perfect third party you want, but if you don't have ballot access, if you can't get past all of the various different hurdles, fundraising hurdles, signature hurdles, to get that access, to get what you need, then what does it matter, right? You have to first figure out a way to break the system to get your third party, your dream third party. In order for even it to get on the ticket, you have to break through the system that's been set up, a rigged system set up by the duopoly to keep the duopoly in place. Our leaders in the various different levels of our government, from the municipalities all the way up to the federal government, they've set up hurdles in order to prevent any other party from coming forward and challenging their power. They like it between just the two of them. So there's no incentive for them to make any change and to allow more competition. No one wants more competition. If you can rig it and have fewer people against you, then it's a better system, right? For you. So the whole point of the Forward Party, and this is where I think the party needs to work on messaging. In fact, I actually don't think it should even be called a party. I actually think it should be called a caucus. It would help people understand it better. But to be in transparency, I'm actually also on the leadership board of the Forward Party. I think Jesse Ventura might be. I'm not 100% certain, but part of my job, or what, I'm not paid or anything. I'm just part of it. I give ideas. That's all I do. I just show up to some meetings and they ask, my opinion on things. I don't get paid or anything like that. But one of my suggestions has been that the messaging is not clear. But people are looking at this as a party, and they're expecting to see policies in a party, because that's what you expect when you're joining a party. You want to know, what do you stand for? And the Forward Party doesn't really stand for any of that. The Forward Party's only real objective is to break the system to allow in third parties. So you don't actually have to abandon whatever party you like, whatever your preferred party is, to be a part of the Forward Party. That's why I feel like it should be really called a caucus. But there's a reason why it's called a party. And so it is actually a party, but it really is operating more like a caucus. So the goal is to get people on both sides. So you could get Republicans, you could get Democrats, and they're endorsed by the Forward Party, and they're funded by the Forward Party. This is the most important part. They're funded, their political campaigns are funded by the Forward Party, not by Democrats or Republicans. And they run on those tickets. They then get into office, and when they're there, they implement the Forward Party agenda, which is to break the system to allow for things like ranked choice voting, and to allow things like third parties coming in, any third party. So the Forward Party is doing the dirty work to allow for your favorite third party to then be able to emerge. Right now, you don't have a chance. So the Forward Party is saying, break the duopoly, and let's make it happen to where we can get in these third parties. And then you can select whichever third party you want, because your third party actually has a shot, or you won't feel like you're you won't be accused of throwing your vote away if there's ranked choice voting, right? You would say, well, I prefer this candidate and then this candidate, and you kind of rank them however you want. So that is the goal of the Forward Party. Why it's not a caucus and why it's an actual party is because in certain municipalities and states, the idea is to actually get a Forward Party candidate on the ballot where there can be ballot access for the Forward Party. So they're going about the breaking of the duopoly in a few different, they're like attacking it. It's like Jurassic Park, if you just recently watched that movie, right? So like, it's like the dinosaur that tests the fence and looks for the cracks in all the different spots, right? And goes around like, where's the cracks? So the reason why the Forward Party is using a variety of different tactics, like running candidates on running their own candidates, endorsing candidates that are running in different parties, it's just to find the weak spot in each of those different elections. Some areas of the country, you'll have to run as a Democrat. You won't have a chance if you don't. Some areas of the country, you have to run as a Republican. Some areas of the country, or some cities or municipalities, it's better if you're an outsider, like on a ticket like Forward Party. So any way we could get people elected to go in there and then say, time for change. We're breaking this party up and we're going to let other people in. And that's the whole, right? That's the whole goal. So that's why there are no policies in that party, because it's not meant for that.
You have explained this a lot better than Andrew has. I got to tell you, like you really broke this down. I wish he would explain it in that way, because I have seen him do a couple interviews and they keep asking the same questions, like what are the policies? And he doesn't really answer the question. And then the other thing too, is that he keeps mentioning that it's centrist. And I think for people, those of us who are further left, people who are like progressives or Marxists, etc., when we hear that word centrist, like for me, I think Bill Clinton.
Right. It feels like a dirty word, right? And it has been a dirty word for a long time. It's like, oh, great. So, but also one thing the Forward Party is aiming to do. So once the candidates get in there, obviously they're not going to only be voting on like breaking up the system so that third parties can come in. There's a lot of votes that happen, right? So if you're sitting in that chair and you've been elected and now you're endorsed by the Forward Party, when you're there, you're going to have to actually do some politics, right? You're going to have to actually vote and do your job. And at that point, then kind of the ethos of the party is to work together. So it is not clear. There isn't really a policy. It's like you just try to use common sense and make the best decisions based on, whatever the issue is at that point and who you're dealing with in whichever office you're sitting in. So if you're in the state of Idaho, for example, the compromise is going to be very different than if you're sitting in California. So, on things like gun control, right? So if the gun control issue comes up and you're a Forward Party caucus person sitting in, the House of Reps or in the legislature of Idaho versus the legislature of California, needing to make some compromises, needing to work together means something a bit different in each scenario. So also kind of the ethos is that there's just a bit, it's a bit too much like all or nothing. Like, so if you're part of the, this is why people get mad at Joe Manchin, because he's like, well, I'm from a red state. And then people don't really understand that, especially those of us living in California who are not from a red state. It's like it's like, well, just do this. Like, this is what Democrats want. And it's like, well, not really. Democrats in a red state are different than Democrats coming from a blue state. Democrats in a red state are like Republicans in a blue state, right? So you've got a bunch of different mentalities. And the idea then is to get in there and just work together to drop the animosity, drop this is my demand because I'm a Democrat and I demand that, this is what our platform is. And so we're not deviating from that. It's like, just get in there and try to be as reasonable as possible and try to just get something done. So that part, I think, does kind of make people say, yeah, but what is that thing you're going to do? Are you going to agree with me? And no, in some cases, the forward party candidate you would not agree with. I don't think you would agree with, let's say, a forward party candidate that is endorsed in the state of Idaho. That person probably is a Republican, fundamentally. But they also want to break the system. They also, there's a lot of things you agree with them on, but they wouldn't necessarily represent you when it comes to policy as much in other ways. But that person is there to help you so that eventually you can have that person that represents you possibly sit there if they get enough votes, but they would at least be able to.
I think that, a lot of people really got excited about Movement for a People's Party, and we've seen which way that has gone. And so people were really disappointed about what's happening with MPP. And then they hear Forward Party and they're like, okay, well, maybe this is the right thing. This is what we should be going after. And then they hear these things. They're like, we don't hear policies. Like the way you explained it, like, it all makes perfect sense now. But I think when Andrew is talking about it, he doesn't explain it that way. And so I think some people are just confused, and some people are like, I hope this is not going to be another MPP, where MPP said they were going to get candidates on the ballot, and it's been 5 years and none of that has happened.
Yeah, that's why there's got to be work on the messaging with the forward party, because it is not a traditional third party in the way you think a third party is. Like, I'm a member of the forward party because I believe in breaking up the system and trying to get third parties in there, because I don't like my choices. I don't like Democrats and Republicans. So I want different choices. So I joined Forward Party to try to help make effective change so that I can find another party that I feel like I actually identify with, and there's actually a shot at that party making it. So that's why with Forward Party, you'll see from time to time on Twitter, maybe Andrew will tweet out something like, you can be a Republican and be a member of the Forward Party. That just confuses people. So there definitely needs to, but it's true. It's totally true. I understand it, but most people don't understand it. And so I do think there needs to be better messaging with what it is, so that people understand. Don't come here looking for policy. Go to your third party looking for that policy, but come to the Forward Party to help break your third party in.
Got it. I want to talk to you about Rising. Now, I know there was an interview recently with Dr. Fauci. I only saw like part of it because I noticed that you weren't on the interview, and I was like, that's odd. Why is Kim not on this interview? And I said, oh, maybe Kim's just out. And I was like, no, I don't think she would have missed this interview. And then I saw your tweet and I was like, aha, I was right. So let's talk about that. I mean, and also, how are you feeling now with the way that everything like went down? But could you explain to everyone who may not be aware first, like what happened with that interview?
Yeah. So, I've been on Rising for a year, and, obviously some of the segments that were some of my most popular were about COVID, the pandemic, and my criticisms of that response, criticisms of Fauci. In fact, everybody on this show criticized Fauci. Yep. So, that everybody had their own beef with him. Like Ryan Grimm, his beef was the lab leak theory. Robbie's beef was the mask mandates. And then my beef was like everything, right? With Fauci. And of course, I was the most outspoken, and my segments on him were, the most viewed. So yeah, when the opportunity to interview Fauci came along, I wanted to be on that interview. And I made it known to the producers that I wanted to be in that interview. I found out about it Sunday night. So this was Sunday, the night before the interview was to be on a Monday. So I found out the night before, and I don't know if I was supposed to find out actually, because they'd actually booked that interview a couple of weeks in advance, and I hadn't heard about it. And then I saw we have a Slack thread, and I saw in the Slack thread that Fauci was going to be interviewed. And I said, wait, Fauci's on the show? And no one responded to me. and then I got a phone call, and the producers said to me, well, yeah, Fauci's going to be on tomorrow, but you're not in the interview, basically, is what they told me. I mean, they just said, we didn't submit for when Fauci's team asked, when we submitted for the interview, Fauci's team asked who would be the hosts. We told them Robbie and Batya, and they asked again, and we again told them Robbie and Batya, and they asked again, and we again told them Robbie and Batya. So, basically what I got from that, they didn't say it specifically, but I implied that the reason why Fauci's team kept asking over and over is because they wanted to make sure, like, now who? Because we know who's on your show. Like, we know that Kim lady's on there. So who's going to be interviewing? And they kept reiterating, not Kim. And I said to them, yes, Kim, or nobody. Like, we all should be doing this interview, or no one. Go back to Fauci's team and tell them Kim's in the interview. And if they come back and say, then no go, then fine. We go and we tell the audience what happened. And we tell them that a government worker who works for the American people wouldn't face us, that he only wants to go on certain media shows, and he won't face the American people as he should, as he's made all of these recommendations that have completely changed our lives over the last couple of years, and he won't face the American people. We're going to go and tell everybody that he's a coward, basically. And I said, otherwise, look, the audience expects me to be in that interview. And if I'm not in that, they won't trust the show. They'll revolt. They'll watch that episode and they'll say, this is crap. You guys are establishment media. They won't trust you. It'll be no different than CNN. And you can't do that. So that conversation was fine. It was a good conversation. They agreed. They were like, yeah, no, we understand. I said, yeah, so just go back to Fauci's team and see what they say, and we'll figure it out. The next morning, as I'm getting ready to join the show, I get a phone call again from the executive producer, who was the one that called me the night before. And she just said, hey, we talked about this. I ran this kind of up the chain. We discussed this. And we've decided we're just going to go ahead with the Fauci interview as is. We're not going back to the Fauci team. We're not saying anything to them. And I just said, so you want me to come on and record a couple of segments, and then you want me to leave so that you guys can interview Fauci? Like, let me get this straight. Like, that's what you're asking of me. And I've been telling the audience for the last year that I'm not censored, that I'm not hindered, that I'm not held back, that yes, I joined corporate media after being an independent person on my own channel for a long time. And then I joined corporate media, and I promised the audience that I was not being censored, held back, or any of that goes on in corporate media. How am I supposed to go back to the audience and say, and make that claim anymore after this? Like, because you guys won't go and tell Fauci's team that I'm a host of this show, bottom line.
That's right.
And, I just told them the audience won't trust you. The audience won't trust me. There's no way for me to spin this, to make this sound better than it is. And I don't think I can stick around with that. This will be reputation ruining for both of us. And they went ahead. I tried to get them to stop after that conversation. There were still 2 hours in between that conversation. And when Fauci was to appear, I screamed fire over and over at everybody. Like, I was like, guys, stop. Don't do this. Don't do this. I like messaged every producer. I Slacked the whole team. I emailed the general manager. I just went, like, try to get them to not. And then when they did the interview, I just begged them not to air it. I just said, guys, don't air it. Don't do this to yourselves. Don't do this to me. Just don't do it. Because I can't come back and be here a part of this if this goes on, because I promised my audience that I would not be censored or held back or limited in any way. And this clearly is that. That is what's happening here. So they made their choice.
I just have to say, it kind of reminded me when Bernie Sanders was going to do an interview on Crystal Kyle and Friends, and with the exception that
Kyle wasn't in it. I told them about that. And I said, this will be the same. Like, you cannot, and they were like, oh, we didn't know about that. And I was like, yes, like, how is Kyle excluded from his own show for an interview with Bernie? That's not worth it. All it's going to do is give you a
no,
bad reputation. Audiences don't like that. And
no,
not only that, but, Fauci and Bernie, it's not like you're getting like someone who never does an interview and they're
right,
like coming out and they're finally going to talk and you're going to be the person they speak to, you know, this isn't an interview with Julian Assange, for example. Like,
that's right.
this is Fauci's everywhere. He talks to everybody all the time. You know what this guy's going to say. This isn't something, there's no bombshell here with this guy. And the same thing with Bernie, even. Like, you know
Yep.
what Bernie's going to say. There's no bombshell. So why sacrifice your show's integrity and then have people bring it up like you just did, like, remember when, and that made Crystal look bad ultimately in that situation. It's like, why did you go through with that? Why did you guys go through with that request and say, okay, we'll bend and we won't have the other host whose name's on the title? I mean, at least with Rising, my name's not on the title, but my face was front and center. So it's like, why? But so it's the same. Like, why would you exclude a host from their own show? I mean, the audiences will just not trust you after that. Even if it's just a little bit that they don't trust you, you can't afford that.
Did they not? I mean, did they try to like get you to come back like after? I'm just curious because like you had viral videos on Rising.
There were conversations and but the damage had been done, unfortunately, at that point. I tried everything I could in advance to stop that, to stop the interview from happening without me, because I knew the audience would just not take it. And quite honestly, before I even said anything about not being with Rising anymore or any of that, I didn't say a word. I was silent, and we watched those comments come in on YouTube, in the comment section. And normally they say, like, we're used to like the whole, where's Kim? Kim should be in on this conversation. Like, those are comments that happen in a lot of segments. But this comment section, the audience was like, I don't, that's it. I'm done with you guys. Like, how dare you do this to Kim? They all knew what had happened. It didn't take me saying a word about anything for the audience to figure out that I had been that I had been omitted from that interview, that I'd been prevented from being a part of it. And now the audience didn't know why. They maybe blamed Fauci's team. But even then, the audience then blamed Rising, because they felt like even if Fauci's team excluded Kim, you guys shouldn't have done that. You guys should have just had her in there anyway and said, screw you guys, or not done the interview at all. Like, the audience already was saying all of that. So yeah, there were some conversations and I just said, look at the comments. It's already happening. There's only a couple ways for me to come back. And that is, we were in talks for me to have my own show, and we actually had worked out the agreement already. The contract was done actually for me to have my own show. And then about a week before this incident, we had spent months negotiating this contract, by the way, since March. And and it was finished. And the week before the Fauci interview, they suddenly said, well, actually, we have to put your new show on hold, because they hired somebody new who was going to be coming in and running the place. And they're like, we just want to get that person acclimated and figure things out. And then we just need like a few months before we can implement your show. And at that point, when this all went down, and I went back to them and I said, no, the only way this works is you guys give me my own show now, because the decision did not come from the higher ups, actually, with me not being in that Fauci interview. It actually came from the people running that show specifically. So if I separated from the show, I would have been able to retain, like, I wouldn't have been censored or held back or any of that, if that makes sense. Does that make, yeah. So it wasn't the management or the higher up or the corporate people who actually made the editorial decision. It was actually the executive producers of the show itself that made the editorial decision. And I was saying, I want to be separated from that And then if you give me my own show, and part of my deal with my own show was that I was the executive producer of my own show. I would have been the one making the final editorial decisions on my own show. And so that's the way for me to stay. But they just were not ready to do that. They didn't want to, they didn't want to do that. So that was the only way that I could have, without totally ruining what I felt like would have been reputation ruining after what I'd promised everybody for a year.
Well, kudos to you for, speaking up for yourself, because most people wouldn't have been brave to do that. Just being honest. Like most people would have been like, okay, I'll just sit this one out and then I'll be back with you guys tomorrow. But no, kudos to you for doing that, because it's just, it's going to hurt them in the end. I saw the subs are already decreasing. I think it does not send a good message to viewers when we do look on that platform and it just seems like they're going through these like rotating hosts,
right?
Where it used to be like more consistent, and it just sends a message to the audience that like something is amiss here, something is just not working out well. It seems like they're trying to figure things out, but they haven't figured it out.
Yeah, it definitely was an inconvenient time for this to happen. My husband and I are actually in escrow on a house, and yeah, and on top, so that's scary. And on top of it, we actually had so even though they pulled back the contract from my own show, they had maintained the financial aspect of it, which would have been like a lot more than I was making, double actually, maybe more than double than what I was making every day on Rising. Because I was the lowest paid of the, it's a whole different situation, a whole different conversation. But I had it was a big contract that I would be doing just fine right now. And I wouldn't be stressing out about the fact that we also were in escrow on a house. We would have had what we planned when we went into escrow with the house to make sure that we were comfortable, moving and taking on a mortgage and all the things that come along with that. So I'm really grateful. My husband has been fantastic through this process. Like when everything went down that day, and that was the day that we went into escrow, I was like, so anyway, I don't have a job. And I'm really grateful he did not freak out at all. He just said, okay, I have faith in you. You'll just go back and do your own channel. You'll be okay. Like, it'll all be okay. He just was so calm. I don't know how somebody stays calm in that situation when you're like, so yeah, I know we're buying a house and all, but I don't have a job.
Well, again, I commend you for like doing that, because it's just, you can't. Oh boy, the workers have got to stand up. The workers have got to stand up. I've been telling everybody that. But I think that, have you thought about, I know you have your show on YouTube. Is there any other avenues you might be looking at in terms of independent media as well going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really lucky that, and being on Rising was a great thing for me, and I really feel like, obviously I got a lot of exposure being there, so I'm totally grateful for the opportunity of been on it for a year. And I was able to say my piece to a larger group of people, which I was really grateful for, being able to say the things that I said, especially during the pandemic. Even though I'm still being labeled a conspiracy theorist for saying that the vaccine doesn't stop the spread. And I'm like, how is that? Like, how, somebody explain that to me. Like, how is that a conspiracy theory still? But, yeah, I was very fortunate that shortly after, so I did have those moment of stress, with like, oh my gosh, we're buying a townhouse, we're buying a condo, but I'm like, oh my gosh, we're buying this condo. And on the top of it, I don't have a job. And I was really lucky that shortly, really quickly after, when word got out, I did get quite a few, I would say, entities reaching out and saying, hey, we would like to have you, do a show on our platform, or do a show and we'll distribute it, or, those types of conversations, from companies that are not yet launched, companies that are already launched, but they all would allow, it would be my own independent. And even with The Hill, the contract that we had worked out for my own show with The Hill was me having my own independent show that I would basically just distribute to The Hill. So, I'm very, very protective of my independence. and also the editorial control of my show. And that, I really enjoyed being on Rising. It was a great time, but I had no real editorial control over the show. I controlled my radar completely. That was 100% me, but the rest of the show I had no control over. And that, that's like, it's challenging in that situation. And every host on that show kind of struggles with it, because every host, I think, feels like, I really don't want to talk about this topic. Or I really don't want to talk about this topic. But you have to, because there's more than one of you, right? So everybody gets to pick. But yeah, so any other thing that I do, it would definitely be 100% my control. And I would not have these types of situations happen, hopefully. I mean, I don't know. I didn't think this would happen, honestly. So you never know what is going to happen. But yeah, there's other things in the works. So I do believe that I will have my show that I'm currently doing now. It will expand and in like length, because right now I'm just doing a segment a day on my channel. It'll expand, and it will also be distributed differently. That's what I know. That's what I know, because as long as one of these works out. But who knows? Anything could happen.
That's awesome. Do you think that you would get on Call-In? I don't know. Have you listened to Call-In yet?
So I have the app, right? And I don't know how to use it, because what I'd want to do, maybe you could teach me, because you know what you're doing more than I do. Can you link it into your show when you're streaming like this, so that can you like the audio, or do you have to be on the app?
So Eric, my producer in the background, he actually did that. He used to do that for me. He was able to find a way to connect both. But then when Call-In started giving those of us at RBN like a contract with them, in the contract it said that we could only do it on Call-In. So that's why I don't do that dual. I used to do a simulcast, and that's why I don't do that anymore, because they want it to only be on Call-In. But Eric, I can link you up with Eric, and he can explain like how to do it.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't do, because if I do a call-in show, not call-in, but call-in, you get it. So if I do a call-in show using call-in, I would definitely want it to be on my show. I wouldn't want to do a separate show. Yeah. But I have been trying to figure out a way, because, I used to do radio for years. I was a radio talk show host for over 10 years, and my radio shows were call-in radio talk shows. So I miss it. I'm like, and that was my thing. That was what I was, I think, best at. And so I'm wanting to get back to taking calls, talking to people, and doing that. But I would need to figure out a way to set that up. Minus I might, because we are getting our own place. So I'll be able to maybe install like a landline, and maybe have actual, an 800 number or something, and have people actually just call.
It's fun, because you finally get to hear from, I get to hear what people sound like and not just see them in the chat.
Right.
So it's kind of fun with that. But yeah, I think it's growing. I think more people are starting to download that app. That was the thing in the beginning. Some people didn't want to download another app.
Right.
But I think more people are going over towards it now.
Yeah, I can understand, if your favorite person is over there and you have a chance to maybe talk to him, that is fun. So I can understand the attraction, for sure. But I'd want to do it on a wider space than just in call-in. So I would maybe do like an 800 number, and people would just call me, I guess. Maybe I'll do it that way. But I have been trying to figure out a way to go back to, I've been thinking about this for a couple of years. I've been wanting to go back to radio. I even told, some of the radio guys that I used to be with, like, maybe I'll come back and do a radio show. And they're like, you don't want to do that. You're fine you're good where you are. And I'm like, but I miss it.
Well, did you know Jamal Thomas is doing a radio show with Sputnik?
Yeah. I talked to Jamal about that. Yeah. They always sometimes will ask me if I want to come and do a radio show over there on Sputnik, which would be fun. But right now, it's tricky going over to the, to like the Russians, I guess. I don't know.
I know. I shared it on Twitter, and people were telling me, they were like, when we click on this, it says this is Russian affiliated information. I'm like, we were talking about Joe Biden.
Right. I mean, I personally, I'm not like, a lot of media we get has funding from the government of whatever that media company comes from. I don't know why we're so, we're not at war with Russia. We have to remember that we are not at war with Russia. So it makes no sense. I mean, we're in a proxy war, but we're in proxy wars all the time, but we're not actually in war at a war with Russia. So why would they label anything that has Russian funding as like, oh, this is Russian media? Yeah, of course. You know, down the street from my mom's house, there's a mall. That mall is actually owned by the Vietnamese Communist government, but they don't put a sign out front saying like, you enter in here and, you know, it's the communists that you're going to be giving money to, and don't, you know, and the propaganda that's coming from these communists. Like, when I turn on BBC, I don't get a flashing warning like the Brits, you know, the Brits are coming, the British are coming, you know. So why do we do that to a country that we're not even at war with? And then, you know, and one of the reasons why the Vietnamese like country has this mall is to service the Vietnamese expats that are living in the United States. They still have an affinity, a community, a bond, and they want to
Mhm.
service that group, right? So the same thing with like the Russians, like why can't they have Russian anything and say, well, we've got Russians living all around the world and we want to give them, you know, some piece of Russia. Like that to me sounds fair. I don't understand why we then have to. And then, you know, so then Sputnik and
Mhm.
RT and all that, they get this bad, you know, people then, you know, they're like, ah, get away. Like you used to work for RT or Sputnik. Oh no. And it's like, give me a break. I mean, there used to be a rotating door between like HuffPost and RT all the time. It was just like a normal thing. And now it's you're, you know, a pariah of some kind. It just, I'm really totally against that. I have nothing against, I mean, I think RT made excellent, excellent programming. And
So
it's a shame, you know.
I know they lost so many great voices over there.
Yeah.
So many people. I have one more question for you. Last year, or actually, I think it was a couple months ago, I remember Rising actually received one of those warnings from YouTube. I mean, it's been happening to a lot of people. And it wasn't even because something that was said on Rising, it was because a video that was played and it was Trump making a speech. I remember that happened.
Right. Yeah.
And when you guys came back, I remember you said that you were talking about like your journey in independent media. And there was something that you said that I thought was really important for people to hear. You were saying how like when you started in the beginning, you had like a ring light and you had your little camera, and that's how you started. And you said, and you did it on your own. And I just want you to know, I haven't said this to you, but I just want you to know, like hearing that from you was very inspiring, because like for a while I thought I was on my own, like I was alone in this, like feeling like I'm doing this all on my own. But when I heard you say that, I realized like, okay, I'm not the only one who I really did not have like a circle of I guess I really wasn't connected to a group per se, like
Yeah.
in this space. And so I just jumped in and just kind of took my hand at it. And then RBN contacted me and they said, would you like to join like our network? And I joined with them and I still kept my show. And I just want to let you know, like, thank you so much for saying that, because you made me realize that, you know, not everybody has that. And when you do it on your own, you still can make it on your own. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Well, if you saw my setup now, it's not much different. I'm still I'm still in a bedroom, and I still have just like the light and the camera. You know, I use a Canon and I just got it connected to my laptop, and I have a very it's an unimpressive setup totally, and it's very inexpensive. And yeah, but doing it, that's how I started. I did it on my own. And I still do it largely. Now I do have a part-time producer that helps me with some graphics and stuff, but yeah, it's a fun time. It's a great journey, right? I mean, and you're doing great. So I think, you know, and you're getting all these big interviews with, you know, I saw Chris Hedges and all that, you know, you talk to a lot of really cool people. And I love what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. So you're not alone anymore, right?
I'm not, I'm not. Thank you so much. But what advice would you give to people who are thinking about getting into independent media today?
I give the same advice I would give anybody that was trying to get into radio. So back when I was doing my radio show and I'd have interns and others that always wanted to know, Kim, how did you, you know, what's the advice that you would give? And my advice is the same advice for both. And that is be yourself. Whatever you do, be yourself, because that's what audiences are. And then you don't know what an audience is going to like. You don't know if you're going to hit,
Yeah.
you don't know if you're going to miss. You don't know. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be brave. Put yourself out there, but don't try to be anybody else. Just be you. Don't try to mimic anybody else. Just go out there and be you and, see what happens.
Awesome. Kim, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Where can people find you on social media?
Well, I have my Twitter. I hate Twitter, but I'm there at Kim Iversen Show. I hate that place. Don't go there. Just go to my YouTube instead. Watch my segments. Don't go to my Twitter account. If you go to my Twitter, you won't like me. I mean, I don't know, because some people like me. I'm better when I'm talking. I'm not so good when I'm typing. Even my friends, my producers, my family, they try to avoid texting me because they say that my texts come out mean. I sound like I just fire stuff off, and they're like, oh, is she mad or is she, whatever. Just go to YouTube, find me there, find me, I'm on Rockfin, Rumble, YouTube, Locals, that's where. Don't go to my Twitter.
Awesome. Kim, thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and go to some comments, and then I'm going to shout out patrons, and then we'll get into the news stories. I have some interesting stories tonight. Let's go ahead to comments first. Shout out to Fo Q, who's a Sabby member. Thank you so much for the $4 super sticker. You rock. A kid says, Sabby and Kim, please consider California is a majority Democratic, and still the legislators refuse to bring Medicare for all to a vote. Why? It's not because they were threatened. It's because they serve their donors. Yes, that was another situation where big money came in. That's why they wouldn't do it. Thanks for the super chat. Anthony, would you support a pro-war lockdown forward candidate? I would not. But I got to tell you this. I'm glad that Kim explained it and broke it down because I didn't really know. I told you guys, we've been talking about this for a couple of days, right? And I was just like, I don't really know. I don't really see that many policies. Thank you for the super chat, Jolly B. Props to Eric. That's right. Shout out to Eric. He's my producer in the background because a lot of these things Sabrina did not figure out on her own, like the technical stuff. Like Eric was able to do a lot of things that you see today. All right, guys, what are we talking about tonight? I'm going to go ahead and share my thumbnail here. Interesting stories tonight. So I do listen to you guys when you send me emails. I know I may not always respond. Sometimes I forget. And honestly, yeah, I have a lot of emails. But I know some of you have asked me multiple times, can I talk more about local news? So I do have one local news story tonight. So tonight we're discussing, of course, Kim Iversen was just here. We're also going to discuss Nancy Pelosi's confusion. So that's an interesting story that I can't wait to talk about in reference to Taiwan. There seems to be some communication breakdowns going on between Nancy Pelosi and the White House as well. I'm also going to discuss, and this is the local story, Governor Baker is under fire. It does not look good for him. And last but not least, I'm also going to discuss Kansas wins. So what is this about? Stop the ban, vote no. So we're going to get into that as well. Quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested and want to be a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you guys so much. And I do want to give a huge shout out to a newbie Sabby patron, Vim ML. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get into our first news story. Now, this is about Kansas. And this goes back to something Roger Meadows has been talking about often, which is ballot initiatives or constitutional amendment. Now, Kansas is one of those states that has a constitutional amendment, and they actually put it to good use. So this happened. Now, Reproductive Freedom for All tweeted this: great news out of Kansas tonight. Voters in Kansas have successfully protected abortion rights at the ballot box. This is a huge win for Kansians and a great sign that direct democracy is the best way for voters to safeguard our reproductive freedom. So this is what we're talking about, guys. Even though the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Kansas was able to make some kind of change through a constitutional amendment, because it is one of those states that has a constitutional amendment. They were able to say, wait a minute, even though you made that overturn, we're going to make sure that those protections stay put in our state. Now, some people are really surprised that Kansas actually supported this. Most people would assume, because it's a red state, that they would not want to go in this direction. But this goes to show you what I've said before, that just because someone is conservative doesn't necessarily mean that they are against abortion. And this is important for people to know. So I want to go ahead and share this article, because I'm going to explain to you how they were able to do this. Here's how abortion rights supporters won in conservative Kansas. And I hope more people are sharing this story, guys. There's people crying tears of joy there. Let's go ahead and get into this. Supporters of abortion rights won a huge and surprising victory on Tuesday in one of the most conservative states in the country, with Kansas voters resoundingly rejecting a constitutional amendment that would have let state legislatures ban or significantly restrict abortion. Results were still coming in as the night wore on, but with more than 90% of ballots counted, the pro-abortion rights side was ahead by about 18 percentage points, a staggering margin in a state that voted for President Donald Trump in 2020 by a margin of just under 15 points. Here's a look at what happened. So again, I want to highlight here, this state heavily voted for Trump in 2020, but still voted in favor of pro-abortion rights. This is interesting, because this flips that narrative that conservatives are against abortion. And this goes back to something else I told you before. Just because someone voted for Donald Trump, that doesn't mean they agreed with every single policy that he ran on. Roger Meadows mentioned this in the call-in segment today. A lot of times when people are voting, what are they voting for? They're either voting because they like the person, they're voting against something, or they're voting out of fear a lot of times. So obviously, people that voted for him in 2020, maybe not everybody was a huge Donald Trump fan, but maybe, just maybe, some of them really, really did not like Hillary Clinton. Who would have thought? Let's go back into this. Abortion opponents underperformed in conservative areas. Going into Election Day, many observers believe the outcome of the referendum would be determined in an increasingly Democratic areas like Kansas City suburbs. That is, by whether enough voters turned out there to compensate for the very conservative lean of the rest of the state. But abortion opponents did surprisingly poorly, even in the reddest places. Wow, guys. Consider far western Kansas, a rural region along the Colorado border that votes overwhelmingly Republican. In Hamilton County, which voted 81% for Mr. Trump in 2020, less than 56% choose the anti-abortion position on Tuesday, with about 90% of the vote counted there. In Greeley County, which voted more than 85% for Mr. Trump, only about 60% chose the anti-abortion position. We can talk about the cities all day long, but Kansas is known as a rural Republican state for a reason. Rural Republican areas cover enough of the state that they can, and almost always do, outvote the cities. You hear this? This is why I tell you it's important to pay attention to the rural areas as well. This is something the Democratic Party does not do very well, especially in 2020 and 2016. They pay a lot of attention in these coastal elite urban meccas where they know they're pretty much going to be guaranteed to win and win big there. And they forget about the rural areas. Hillary Clinton did that. That's how you ended up with someone like Trump. So You have to pay attention to those rural communities as well. The rejection of the amendment has as much to do with lukewarm support in the reddest counties as it does with strong opposition in the bluest ones. So here we go. Here are people here. I think they're praying there. Yes, they are. Yes, the swing areas swung left. Certainly, though, the cities and suburbs deserve some credit. The comparatively slim margins of victory for abortion opponents in Western Kansas left the door wide open, but abortion rights supporters still had to walk through it, and they did. Wyandotte County, home of Kansas City, Kansas, voted 65% for Joe Biden in 2020, but 74% for abortion rights on Tuesday. Neighboring Johnson County, the state's most populous, voted 53% for Mr. Biden, but more than 68% for abortion rights. What was striking, in fact, was the degree to which the picture was similar everywhere. From the bluest counties to the reddest ones, abortion rights performed better than Mr. Biden. Did you hear that? And opposition to abortion performed worse than Mr. Trump. See, when you get people on the issues, this is when more people really pay attention. And how do you really get people on the issues? Those of us that live in these ballot initiative states, these constitutional amendment states, South Dakota is another constitutional amendment state. They are going to have Medicaid expansion on their ballot in November this year through that amendment. When you pay attention to those states, when we have those choices on the ballot, that is one of the times where we have no choice but to focus on the policy at hand and not focus on the candidate that is pushing the policy. Because when it comes to ballot initiatives, there is no candidate pushing the policies. The policies are put there by the people. They're put there by people like you and me. So we're voting for the things that the people want, not something that a candidate is running on so that they can win. And that is the huge difference there. And I wish every state in this country was a BI state or had a constitutional amendment. If we had every state had that type of power, do you know what we could accomplish in this country? People would pay way more attention to local politics than they would to national politics. I can tell you that much. So this is a big win for Kansas. This just goes to show you again, it's a long article. I'm not going to read the entire article, but it also says right here that turnout was high. That's key. This is why I keep saying to pay more attention to the local level than the national level. Now, that's going to be different for all of us. We all don't live in the same state, right? But you should know what's going on in your state. And that's something I want us all to try to work on and do better at, right? If there's local stories happening in your state, email them to me. Just because I don't live there doesn't mean I don't want to talk about it. But we want to keep more eyes on this. Now, what will be interesting is to see if more states follow what Kansas just did. What if South Dakota does this? Again, they're another state that has constitutional amendment. Let's keep our eyes open for that. I'll go ahead and take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Kansas in the house. It's Kansas in the house. All right. Shout out for the tip on Rockfin, Dave Burt. Thank you for this. Nice to be back this channel, seeing Sister Sabby, hostess with the mostest, intrepid reporting, presenting, and the new coverage. Feels familiar and hard-hitting. Kim Iversen, interesting presenter and commentator, and really good at debunking critical breakdown like Sabs. My favorite thing about Kim is her dogged persistence in many areas. Thank you so much for that, Dave. All right, all right. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Macharius39. Breaking the duopoly is the only way to get change. That's one way, Macharius, but I would also add, I would like to see direct action and mutual aid along with that too. Shout out to Troy Z and KC, who just became a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. What's going on? Marcus Cage is in the house and says, and Western Kansas is super red. Only KCK area, Wichita and Lawrence are blue. The rest is red outside of the reservations. So there you guys go. Marcus is letting you know there in the chat. All right. Shout out to Brady Crow. Thanks for the super chat. Next, Mike, Whitney Webb, Abby Martin, Dr. West for sale. Oh. And Marcus again, Wyandotte is the county I grew up in. By the way, hey, Sabby. Hey, Marcus. Awesome. I've never been to Kansas. So this was all new to me. It was pretty interesting to hear, though. All right, let's get into our second story. We got to talk about what's happening with Nancy Pelosi. Now, you guys know that she did make that trip to Taiwan, which was not a good idea. Obviously, that is sending a statement to China. That's the way I look at it. Whether you actually say those words or not, you are sending a message. But she did it anyway. What I'm going to talk about tonight is why it was a problem that she did this. And also, there seems to be some confusion between what Nancy Pelosi thinks is happening and what the rest of DC thinks is happening. I have a video clip I'm going to show you about that as well in reference to this particular conflict. So now this is from Common Dreams. You guys, if you don't follow them, I definitely recommend that you check them out. They're really good. Nancy Pelosi. Listen to this. Critics call Pelosi's confirmed trip to Taiwan a dangerous war provocation. Hold on, let me see. It's a little bit small. I don't like text that small. Okay. Dangerous war provocation. Taiwan is China. The UN says so. The US and China have said so. Noted one anti-imperialist author, adding that Nancy Pelosi has gone full neocon to violate the one China policy. Now, this article is by Brett Wilkins. So listen to this. Although a stop on the island, which nearly the entire international community, including the United States and the US, consider part of China, is not on Pelosi's public itinerary, a senior Taiwanese official told CNN that the California Democrat is expected to stay overnight in Taiwan, where she will reportedly meet with officials, including President Tsai Ing-wen. Now, obviously, you guys know that trip happened. I'm still going to make this larger because I think, okay, that's better. Now, here's something I want you to take into consideration here. Pelosi is the third highest ranking official in the U.S. government, which means it would be highly sensitive for her to visit Taiwan, no matter what. Gross interference in China's internal affairs. So let's just think about that for a second. You have Joe Biden, you have Kamala Harris, you have Nancy Pelosi, right? I'm just going to throw this out there. If Joe Biden didn't want Nancy Pelosi to go on this trip, she wouldn't be on this trip. I don't think there is anything that Nancy Pelosi is doing that Joe Biden doesn't already want her to do. I'm saying it. I'm saying it. I believe that this was a way for Joe Biden to send a message to China. I really do. Now, many of us with common sense would obviously not want that type of conflict with China, but we're talking about Joe Biden here. He's not really alert, not really with it. So something to think about. So whether she said it or not, it still sends a message. How dare you? Let's all remember this for the future. Now, Zhao said the visit will also seriously undermine China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, wantonly trample on the one China principle, greatly threaten peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, severely undermine China-U.S. relations, and lead to very serious situation and grave consequences. Now, I want to remind everyone here, China's already not too happy with us. I mean, it was just last year that Joe Biden was basically boycotting the Beijing Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and didn't want the U.S. to participate in that because he was accusing China of crimes against humanity, which was really interesting to me. I talked to Aaron Mate about that. I talked to other people about that. And I still didn't see they had no evidence to prove that there were these crimes against humanity that had been done. Now, they kept saying that there was this genocide per se, but again, I still didn't have any evidence that proved that that was happening. Again, I felt like it was just another chance for Joe Biden to go after them because, again, economically, China was doing really well. And the U.S. doesn't want that. They don't want any country to perform economically well on their own. And I've said this before, we need China more than they need us. We don't make anything here. What do we make here? So now keep that in the back of your head about the Beijing Olympics, about Joe Biden making that threat towards China then. And then now you have Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan. And they just told you right here, this would severely undermine China-U.S. relations. We were already having issues with them. So why would she even want to do that knowing that this would escalate things? But again, I don't think she's doing anything that Joe Biden doesn't want her to do. Sometimes they use other people to be the face. Sometimes there's someone else behind the scenes that's making the calls, and they'll use someone else's face to do it so that everybody can't point the finger at that one person every time. Let's go back in. And this is really cool because they used a tweet here from Danny Haiphong, which I thought was awesome. The People's Liberation Army of China will never sit idly by and will make a resolute response and take strong countermeasures to uphold China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. As for what measures, if she dares to go, then let's wait and see. And she did. So that was right before. Oh, hold on. I got to plug this thing up. Uh-oh. Okay. Okay, sorry. Anywho, so they shared this tweet here from Danny Haiphong. Taiwan is China. The UN says so. The US and China have said so in 3 different joint communiques. It's called the One China policy, and Nancy Pelosi has gone full neocon to violate it. Danny's awesome. He can break this down even better. He can break this down so much better than me. Just telling you. But in a Monday video commemorating the 95th birthday of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA, China's Eastern Theater Command vowed it is always ready to fight and would bury any invading enemies. During a Monday press conference, U.S. National Security Council Strategic Communications Coordinator John Kirby, this is the video I'm going to show you in just a second, said that Pelosi would be arriving in Taiwan on a military plane, while the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and other American warships operate nearby. Now, why would she arrive on a military aircraft there? It just, What does this say here? Other American warships operate nearby. Why? Now, again, that was coming from John Kirby. He's the Strategic Communications Coordinator. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense said Monday that 4 Chinese warplanes flew through the island's air defense identification zone. While U.S. President Biden has said that the Pentagon officials believe Pelosi's visit is not a good idea right now, he has been criticized for not objecting more vocally to the trip. What did I tell you? That's because she's not doing anything that he doesn't want her to do. Of course, he's not going to say anything against it. Now, if you want to read this full article, again, this is by Common Dreams. Eric, you can put the link in the chat if people want to read the rest of this, because it's pretty lengthy. But I also want to show the video because I want you guys to see this, because apparently, according to what Nancy Pelosi has said about how the U.S. government feels about Taiwan, apparently that is not actually what the U.S. government is saying. Listen to this video. So this is from Breaking 911. This is hilarious. You guys have got to see this. So this is John Kirby, who was mentioned in that article. This is what John looks like. He's right there. Hi, John. So they're going to ask John, and there's a reporter there in the audience, and he's going to ask him about Nancy Pelosi's statement about what the U.S. government thinks of Taiwan. There's a communication gap here. Listen to what the reporter says to him, and listen to what John Kirby says here.
Admiral, one on Taiwan, if you would, and one on the Middle East very quickly. You keep telling us that U.S. policy hasn't changed and that the United States does not support an independent Taiwan. And yet, if we look at what Speaker Pelosi tweeted from the ground in Taiwan, her post actually states, quote, "America stands with Taiwan." We all know that Taiwan harbors ambitions toward independence. When the Speaker of the House says, "We stand with Taiwan, America stands with Taiwan," how can the Chinese construe that as anything else but that you're supporting independence?
I'll let the Speaker speak for herself. All I can tell you, James, is what I told you yesterday, and I'm happy to repeat it. Nothing has changed about our adherence to the One China policy. Nothing has changed about our stance on Taiwan independence, which is that we do not support Taiwan independence. And nothing has changed, James, about our commitments and how seriously we take those commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. Everything is consistent, James. I can't say that any more clearly.
I'm sorry. Wait for it. I want you to see this again, because wait for his facial expression.
Admiral, one on Taiwan, if you would, and one on the Middle East very quickly. You keep telling us that U.S. policy hasn't changed and that the United States does not support an independent Taiwan. And yet, if we look at what Speaker Pelosi tweeted from the ground in Taiwan, her post actually states, quote, "America stands with Taiwan." We all know that Taiwan harbors ambitions toward independence.
Look at his face. Look at his facial expression. So the reporter just told him, he said, "You just told us, you keep saying that the U.S. Stands with the one China policy, but Nancy Pelosi tweeted that the U.S. government stands with Taiwan's independence." Look at his facial expression. He's like, "What? Come again? Say what? She tweeted out what?" He is not happy. Look at him. Look.
When the Speaker of the House says, "We stand with Taiwan, America stands with Taiwan," how can the Chinese construe that as anything else but that you're supporting independence?
I'll let the Speaker speak for herself. All I can tell you, James, is what I told you yesterday. and I'm happy to repeat it. Nothing has changed about our adherence to the one China policy. Nothing has changed about our stance on Taiwan independence, which is that we do not support Taiwan independence. And nothing has changed, James, about our commitments and how seriously we take those commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. Everything is consistent, James. I can't say that any more clearly.
He said everything's consistent. He told James, who's the reporter, that everything's consistent. Apparently it's not if Nancy Pelosi is saying one thing and you're saying something different. Notice he said he's going to let the speaker speak for herself. Why is that, James? James is saying, I am not going down with this ship. I am not sinking on this one. I am going to let her tank on her own. Nancy is going to fall on her own. Oh my God. I just can't. Do you guys believe this? What? When I first heard this, I said, well, what we have here is a failure to communicate. That's from Cool Hand Luke. Check it out. Good movie. Because obviously he either didn't know about that tweet or he knew about it and was hoping that James wasn't going to ask about that tweet at all. I think he may not have seen it, but either way, obviously there is miscommunication there. Nancy Pelosi is sending out one message. He's sending out a different message, and Joe Biden is nowhere to be found. I love that, Roman. New phone. Who this? What? I would have been like, I'm sorry. What were we talking about again? Or my favorite exit is I have to use the restroom. Gotta go. So there's obviously communication breakdown, but regardless, like she shouldn't have been there in the first place. I've said that multiple times before. All she's doing is just trying to stir up more problems. We don't need any more problems with other countries. The U.S. government is always getting their hands in everyone else's affairs, and it can't even handle its own. Why are you even concerned about what Taiwan is doing, about what China is doing? Take that same energy, for those of you in DC, and put that energy into what's happening in this country with the American people here. Imagine if they did something like that. So you guys heard it here, folks. And not to say that something is going to happen, but if things do happen in the future, I want you to remember who got on the plane and went over there. Let's all remember. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Kim was going along with the narrative that Manchin is listening to West V voters, and the voters from California don't understand why won't they vote for universal policies. We know full well Manchin is not listening to his voters, but his donors. You aren't going to convince me that West Virginia voters don't want Medicare for all. Shift tax burden to big rich, that they love Wall Street banks, don't want money out of politics. Trying to see the other part. Sorry. Ballot initiatives are the only way to know for sure. Unfortunately, West Virginia is not a BI state. Neither is Kansas. Remember, although only half the country allows for BIs initiated by the voter to pass/repeal state law, plus amendment state constitutions. Remember, voters from all 50 states get to ratify their state constitution from what their state legislator puts before them. Call the legislative referral constitutional amendment. Kansas, West Virginia, New York are examples. Yep, you got it, Sab. People vote on three things: familiarity, emotion, and the alphabet letter next to the name, never policy. The most dangerous politician is not who's both terrible on constituent services and policy for the state or the U.S., and only gives a cookout or fish fry to show they're in the community. That's Clyburn for you. Nope. It's the one who is terrible on state or U.S. policy, but A+ on constituent services. Hard to get them out to support ballot initiatives. Well said there, Roger. Okay. We're going to go on to our next story. And this story right here has people really, really upset here in Eastern Massachusetts. But we got to talk about it, because I was just telling you guys the other day, we need to do something about the public transportation system in this country. It just continues to get worse. We're not up to speed when you compare us to other countries, when you compare us to countries like South Korea, when you compare us to countries like Germany and France. We do not have the high-speed rails that we should have, and the public transportation system that we do have in place is not efficient and is not effective, is breaking down half the damn time. And now, because of that, I can tell you that Boston is not excluded from that. Our trains here break down a lot, and now it is causing people to not be able to possibly have a way to get to work if you use the Orange Line. Now, this is something that a lot of people are pissed about. The MBTA, by the way, that is what we call our public transportation system here in Boston. The MBTA riders fume over plans to close the Orange Line for 30 days. Here are the Orange Line here, you guys. You see these little guys? They're orange. That's why it's called the Orange Line. I'll answer that question in just a second, Sebastian. I'm going to explain how it works. So here we go. MBTA riders who have already suffered through a summer filled with delays, derailments, and other disruptions were hit with more hard news this week. The Orange Line will soon be shut down for nearly a month for repairs. Here we go. Lee from Jamaica Plain uses the Orange Line every day to get to Logan Airport. She said the closure set for mid-August would throw a wrench into her morning routine. I'm just a little frustrated. I want to know, what are they going to do about it? The MBTA announced Wednesday it will close the entire line for 30 days, starting August 19th. T leaders say it's the first time in history of the transit system that an entire line will be shut down that long for improvements. Governor Charlie Baker said the temporary closure will allow the T to do needed repairs much more quickly than normal and avoid having to halt trains on weekends and evenings over the next 5 years. This is a mess. This means that delays in Orange Line service or unplanned shuttle diversion due to a degraded track condition will be prevented thanks to completely repaired or replaced track that will be put in place during the shutdown. Again, that is coming from Governor Baker, and that's him here for those who are not aware. By the way, Governor Baker is not running for re-election. So yeah, there's that. Let's go back in. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu echoed T officials, calling the Orange Line closure unprecedented. She said there's not much time for the city or its school district to plan for the diversion. But Wu said she hopes the work can make the line safer and avoid any more delays in the future. Just to let you know, it was just about a week or two ago, an Orange Line train caught on fire and passengers had to jump out to escape. This isn't the first time that's happened. It's happened on the red line. It's happened on the green line. I think the only line it may not have happened on is the blue line. The public transportation system has had a lot of problems. Nobody should have to worry about the train catching on fire when they're just trying to get to work, or they're just trying to get to school, or hell, they're just trying to come home. These things have happened. There have been times when I remember being stuck on the green line for God knows how long, and I'm trying to get to work. Just stuck. There have been times on the red line where the train will get to Harvard Square, and then all of a sudden, you'll hear an announcement where it says, this train is being delayed. We will be sitting here for a while. How long's a while? Back then, there was no Wi-Fi underneath where the tunnels were. So it's not like I could just text my boss and say I'm running late. The problems that you see on the public transportation system here in Boston, in Massachusetts in general, because it's not just Boston, these are not new things. And it's not something that happens once in a while. These things happen every day. If it's not the orange line, it's the red line. If it's not the red line, it's the blue line. If it's not the blue line, it's the silver line. It's the green line. The green line always breaks down. Like, it's not reliable. And this is the reason why when I moved here almost 11 years ago, I never sold my car. I never got rid of my car because you cannot rely on the public transportation system here. You just can't. Now let's go back in because there's something else I want to show you as well. Mayor Wu goes on to say, I'm hopeful that doing this work thoroughly, doing it in one stretch and getting it done now will mean that we are saving years of disruptions in the long run. But many people riding the T on Wednesday were frustrated by the news. Leslie, who commutes on the Orange Line from her home in Jamaica Plain to her work near the North Station, questioned why the T didn't do the work during the pandemic. Hello, somebody give a shout out to Leslie. Thank you. That is a great question, Leslie. Remember when we were shut down for months? Why didn't they work on those trains then? The state has wasted a lot of money, a lot of resources. They had plenty of time to get this stuff done. I remember them complaining about the trains needing to replace them. That was 5 years ago. They were complaining about it. What have they done? And this isn't something that started under Governor Baker's administration. This is something that actually has spilled over from previous governor administrations here in Massachusetts that did not do the maintenance on these trains that was supposed to be done every 5 years. They weren't doing it. I don't know where that money went. This was admitted after the previous governor. It was admitted that they weren't doing these maintenance repairs, that all those years that went by and they weren't doing it. That is why the trains are in such bad shape now. So now they're trying to play catch up. But again, I want to know, where did all that money go? Governor Deval Patrick, who was governor before Charlie Baker, what did you do with all that money that was supposed to go towards the maintenance to fix these trains? Nobody knows. It goes on to say the subway sat empty for a year and a half during the pandemic. There was no one on the road. There was no one on the T. By the way, our subway system here, for short term, we call it T. That's a little nickname we give it. But she's right. There was nobody riding the trains. I think this is the perfect example of government is not here to fix our problems. Yes, Leslie, fire it up. She's right. Good lives across the street from the Green Street station. Good lives across the street from the Green Street station and will see the impact every day. But Good said the closure will be even worse for people who have to take a bus to the subway and already face a longer commute. Worse, she doesn't think the delays will end anytime soon, not with the same people in charge of the T. Only if we got some fresh blood in here. That would be my recommendation. And I don't mean some guy from Everett. I mean some guy from Queens or some guy from Seoul. Thank you. She's talking about Seoul, Korea. Yes, because I lived in New York. And one thing I can say about New York, guess what? Their trains fucking run. The trains run. Our transportation system here is not 24 hours. It's not like New York City. I just want to make that clear to everyone. Last call on a lot of these lines is 12:45. And I think on some of the buses, 1 a.m. But it's not 24 hours. So yes, they have brought in people before from other states to fix it. They brought in a woman from Atlanta to come here and fix it. She was here for a couple of months and she said, this is a freaking disaster. I can't fix this for you. And she pieced out. Now, I kid you not. But yeah, we need to get someone from New York, or we need to get someone from Seoul, Korea to come here and fix this mess of a mess of a mess. That's what we need. I agree with her on that one. So that was the article from WBUR. Again, if you live in the area, you're probably feeling the pain. And I just want to add this, which I think is really important as well. She made a good point there about people who have to transfer lines. I've never had a commute in Boston or Cambridge where I didn't have to transfer to a bus or another train. Never. And so if you're one of those people where you have to take the bus to get to an Orange Line stop, you're screwed. Because obviously, like, for people who don't understand, when you have to make a transfer, you have to make a transfer because the line that you're on does not go to your destination. So you have to transfer to another bus or another T stop to get to where you need to go. And I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. If you are not familiar with the subway system here in Boston, I'm going to make this big for the people in the back. Whee! You know, if you're coming from a place like New York, our public transportation map here may look a little weird. But anyway, I can break this down for you. This, my friend, right up here is the Orange Line. Now, this line, it goes all the way from Oak Grove. That's the final stop going north on the Orange Line. You're going all the way from, you have Malden, you have Medford, Somerville. Sullivan Square is still Somerville, so is Community College. Then you're getting into here where you're going into Boston. If this makes sense to people, I just want to explain to you how it works. This is now you're entering Boston. The Orange Line goes into Boston, goes all the way through downtown Boston, goes all the way down here through Back Bay, all the way through Roxbury, all the way down here where you're getting into Jamaica Plain, all the way down to the last stop in JP, which is Forest Hills. So here's the problem with this entire line being shut down for 30 days. There are transfers on this line. One of them is right here. Now, this is the connecting stop. Let me zoom in so you can see that better. Bro, how did you make the map smaller instead of bigger? That was weird. Okay, anyway. I guess the max I can go on this is 50. I'm sorry, guys. Anywho, this stop right here, where you're at the Orange Line here, there's a connection here. This is very important for people who are jumping off of this commuter rail, which is this purple line here. The commuter rail has this stop where you can get off right here at North Station. There's a connection with the green line and the orange line. So if you live on the orange line and you have to connect to the green line, let's say because you happen to work at Boston University or Boston College, which is all the way over in this mofo, you have to have that connection. You need to have a transfer there. Here's another one, Haymarket. So you have a connection here where the orange line and the green line also meet. Now, this is in North End. This is what we would call Boston's Little Italy, right? Now, there's more. This orange line also has a connection in Downtown Crossing where it meets State Street. Now, this is where a lot of people work in the financial district here. So you're going to lose that connection if you have to come from the blue line and hop onto the orange line. There's more. You cannot forget the connection that the orange line has with Downtown Crossing. Now, that is a very busy area. So you have Park Street Station, and the next stop is Downtown Crossing with the red line right here. And so I don't know what's going to happen there. Maybe they're going to have a shuttle or something, but that's another connecting spot. There is also a connecting spot with the orange line and the silver line in Chinatown. So this is terrible. Like, that's one of those lines you really can't afford to take out. The orange line, the green line, if there's a line you can afford to take out, it's probably the blue line because it doesn't have as many connecting spots. But the green line, which is this whole massive mountain of a mess over here, this is where you have Boston College, Boston University. You can't shutting down that would be a freaking disaster. Everybody would panic. They'd flip out, right? But you still need this orange line because you also have Ruggles stop. Northeastern University is over here. You have, what's the other one? The Technical University. There's another school back there. I always forget the name of that one. But anyway, I did Sabby throwing shade at the blue line. I'm sorry. I'm just saying not as many people take the blue line. But do you guys see what I'm saying? These lines go through multiple towns and through multiple areas. So it's like you're taking all of that out, which means everybody on JP is going to probably try to crowd on the 36 bus. I told you guys before, the subway system here is a hot mess. It is a hot mess. You cannot rely on it to get to work. Blue line, I guess they'll still be okay. The blue line, this is Revere, Everett. Well, part of Everett, not really Chelsea area, but part of Everett and Revere, you're going through there to bring you into Boston. But you can't take this line out for 30. I mean, they don't have a choice. But for someone was mentioning to me that what about Mayor Michelle Wu? Unfortunately, when it comes to the MBTA, that's the governor's responsibility because it services the state. Because the MBTA doesn't just include the subway system for Boston. It also includes the commuter rail line, which are these purple lines that you see here, which go further out to the suburban communities in the state. The commuter rail line goes all the way out to Worcester, Massachusetts, which is in central Mass. So unfortunately, this is Governor Baker's responsibility. And it was Governor DeBall Patrick's responsibility. And he didn't do the maintenance on that system either. And someone told me the other day, this goes all the way back to Governor Weld. So I have to look that up. But either way, it hasn't been done, boo. It hasn't been done. And that's why the trains are so bad now. Again, like I said, you're supposed to do the maintenance. It's supposed to have been every 5 years, and it wasn't being done at all. And yet here we are. So I hope they find a way to get people from those stops, whether it's running shuttle buses so that they can get to work. Because like I said, if you don't have a car, and most people I've met in Boston don't, I don't know what you're going to do if you're on the orange line. Hey, Jet again. Jay, I think you mean JP. JP had a street trolley with cars from the 40s for years. You see? Oh, that was when the orange line was above ground. Because I think I saw a video on YouTube where the orange line used to be above ground. And I was like, what is that? Oh, no. Credit is Born said, sounds like Flint, Michigan, but with rail. I don't know what to say. Oh, my gosh. Right, Nick. They don't care, though. They'll raise our taxes still. Yeah. And they'll increase the price, the subway fare, too. Even though it's not even working. What's that, Eric? Don't park the car. The orange line is out. Oh, boy. I don't even know what to say. Like I said, guys, September will be 11 years for me here. September. And they still haven't figured out how to fix this. They haven't fixed it. So I think I have a comment on Rockfin. I'll go ahead and take that. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabby, you walked right into my lair. As a member of the Public Bank Institute that is trying to get a public bank in every state, you don't like your infrastructure? Well, you can support the Massachusetts Public Bank bills. S665/8H1223. As you know, the main purpose of public banks is to finance infrastructure projects by issuing lines of credit to them, creating public sector jobs which generate taxes getting redeposited into a public bank, while the interest generated goes towards building a surplus in the economy that the public bank is in charge of. Since this is a bill for a state public bank, well, it'd be a surplus in your state, all without having to raise taxes. Take a look at it and see how many co-sponsors are on it. If it looks good, take those bills and use it to start a BI if they're holding it up. Use your platform to boost it. Recruit Stein. Oh, you're giving me ideas, Roger Meadows. That's a good idea. I'll look into that. Thank you for the super chat, Troy Z. Kansas used to be a prairie populous state. Ooh. And yeah, Sebastian said, "Where's Michelle Wu?" Yeah, that was the response. Like, this is the governor's problem. At Kid, thank you for the super chat. Sabby, you love music. Please listen to Iron Sky Paolo Nutini. I'm not familiar with that, but I'll check it out. Nick said 60 billion for Ukraine, though, right? Don't even get me started, man. Sebastiano, high-speed rail would be game-changing if it ever did it properly. Yeah. Like, do you know, I would love to just hop on a high-speed train and be in New York like that. Like, I'm not the best snapper. I'm telling you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging with me tonight. Tomorrow, I'll be back 8 p.m. Eastern time. Should be fun stuff. We're going to talk about 11 demands tomorrow night. And I have like 2 news stories I'm going to cover as well. I'll also be on RBN tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And I'll be on Jesse Ventura and Terrell Ventura's podcast tomorrow on Substack. Although I think that may be recorded, but I'll let you guys know when it's up. Now, I have to tell you guys something very important before I go. I know I say a lot of things on this show. And I know you probably won't remember everything I say. Maybe even most of the things I say. And I totally understand. But if there's one thing I want you to remember, to take away from this show, pass this on to your friends and family as well, is this: pineapple does not go on pizza. All right, guys. A little bit of humor for you. I mean it. No pineapple on the pizza. Don't you put that pineapple on that pizza. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.